Microsoft just got sued, but the weird thing is it's Valve's fault. And that might sound completely insane, but in a way it isn't. What's happened is a new case is claiming that these two tech giants have colluded to deny you better prices, and it's just the latest in a string of lawsuits. Valve are in court so much right now that every new revelation about, well, alleged bad behavior seems to spawn another case. But this new filing shows that I think this story may be far murkier than anyone really expected. And that's because Valve have been pushing developers and publishers, I think, in ways that no one's really seen coming. So today, we have a lot to get into. It might feel like Valve have been getting into legal trouble a lot over the last few years. And that's because they have been. But each case is coming from a different source, right? So their most recent win was a countersuit against a patent troll, which of course was the notorious inventor and litigant Lee M. Rothschild over his malicious legal filings. Shortly after that, then, the state of New York took Valve on, arguing that their loot boxes and marketplace around them basically amounted to unregulated gambling. Valve have moved to dismiss that case, but it's unclear if they're going to have success with that move. But the biggest story is, of course, the one that's been rumbling on for years upon years in many parts of the world. And it's this: anti-competition legal action. The big question is, are Valve rigging game prices against you? Now, that may seem a bit weird, because surely you go onto Steam and you see loads of deals. But, well, there's deeper parts to this. Now, some of this comes from regulators like the Polish Office of Competition and Consumer Protection. Some of it's consumer-driven, like the case at the UK's Competition Appeal Tribunal, which threw out Valve's arguments earlier this year. That one's actually heading to a full hearing. But the longest running of these has been in the United States, and it's the 2021 Wolfire Games case. Basically, Humble Bundle founder and indie dev David Rosen tried to take Valve on for threatening to delist games if they don't keep price parity between Steam and other stores. Now here's the thing. I can already see a few of the comments coming in saying that that rule only applies to Steam keys. Well, we actually have substantial evidence, actual Valve documents, actual Valve communications that very much suggest that's not actually the case. But as for today's news, well, thanks to that Wolfire case, Microsoft are now also being sued. But first, a spot of privacy news. The FTC just settled with a data broker called Kochava over allegations that they sold precise location data from hundreds of millions of phones. It's absolutely mad. It's exactly, though, why I pay for Incogni, today's sponsor. Now, the sorts of data in that case are the kind the FTC alleged could actually reveal visits to sensitive places like, say, health facilities or maybe a place of worship. A grim part of the world we find ourselves in. Now, Incogni is a service that figures out which data brokers are sitting on your personal info and then sends removal requests on your behalf. And it keeps doing it. And that's important because brokers reacquire your data pretty much the second they can. You get a lovely dashboard showing who's been contacted, who's complied, and even how exposed you actually are. And they cover a wide range of data brokers, including the people search sites that quite literally list people's personal details publicly. It's insane. They've been independently verified by Deloitte as well, which does matter when the product is basically fighting paperwork goblins for you. Now look, my name's plastered all over the two YouTube channels. I really don't fancy, say, my home address sitting in some broker spreadsheet, and I certainly don't have the time to chase all that down manually. And to see how well they work, you just need to look at my dashboard. I can see here 298 completed, 310 takedowns sent. There's 23 scheduled. I'm on 20 suppression lists so that those brokers won't recollect my data. It's pretty damn awesome, especially because I don't have the time to do all of that paperwork. I just don't. I reckon you don't either. That's why their service is great. And the good news is you can get 60% off an annual plan by going to incogni.com/Bellular News. That's incogni.com/Bellular News, code Bellular News, and the link's in the description. Okay, back to it. Here's how the story begins, right? So Nicole Carpenter flagged this one up for Aftermath, and it grew straight out of those earlier cases. Two members of the public, Max Rockman, who I swear is not actually a Mega Man character, and Randall Mooring, are suing Microsoft in the state of Washington. It's a proposed class action, and the claim is that, quote, Microsoft and Valve have conspired with the specific goal of not competing in price. And of course, if two big corporations are not competing in price, what that means for you and I as consumers is, well, we pay more money. So that's not particularly great, if true. Now to back this up, they cite two sources. First, there's an arbitration case that Valve are trying to overturn, which found that one clause of Valve's distribution agreement with Microsoft was illegal price fixing. That's obviously a bad look. Obviously though, Valve also do deny it as a part of their wider issues with that arbitration. But here's a link you may not have known. That particular case is actually why you now have a different agreement with Valve, because that case is why Valve removed the arbitration clause in 2024, because it was ruled unenforceable. But the fight here is exactly what put the filings into the plaintiff's hands, and of course now it's evidence of harm to consumers. The second thing then, a report from the Wolfire case in 2024, where a Microsoft employee internally described the policy as, quote, product and price parity. When I looked at it pre-Age of Empires Definitive Edition a few years ago, I found that we could sell it at any price we wanted before the Steam release, but once we released in Steam, we needed to give Steam price parity to our other digital channels. In the case of a Gears of War 5 Steam/Windows Store sim ship, I'd assume Steam demands you don't undercut them once you release on Steam. Now here's what's key, right? That's a Microsoft employee internally treating Steam's parity demands as just being a given, right? So, overall, the evidence is an arbitration ruling plus Microsoft's own internal email, and all of this was stuff already sitting in court records. The case says that Microsoft playing along with this is price collusion, basically cartel behavior, and that's because Microsoft also runs a store. Steam's dominance only holds if the companies big enough to challenge them choose not to challenge them. And the complaint's argument is that Microsoft, of course one of the biggest companies in gaming, made that exact choice. And that choice denies you the benefits of competition, meaning that you're effectively being overcharged. And that, they argue, is a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. This is actually serious business. Of course, we don't know if the court will even let this case proceed, but more documents keep surfacing from the Wolfire case, and they do make one thing fairly clear. Microsoft are not the only major company that Steam have been demanding price parity from. And remember here, we are not talking about Steam keys. So, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Well, in March 2026, the court in the Wolfire case denied Valve's motion for summary judgment. That motion would have effectively ended the case, with the judge making a call based on everything they had seen so far. That was rejected, meaning that it's going to head to a jury trial. And as a result of that, new documents have surfaced. Bloomberg reviewed them, and they found that this goes way beyond just pressuring indie developers. Now, back in July of 2024, we told you about leaked, unredacted documents from the Wolfire case. Now, these were emails, they were from Valve staff, and they explained to indie devs that Valve expected price parity on Steam whether the game used Steam keys or not. So based on that email, whenever you see, say, a viral tweet going around saying that something's a load of bullshit and it only applies to Steam keys, well, we have direct Valve employee communications saying that that's not the case. So it was essentially price parity, and if you don't do price parity, you stop selling in Steam. And obviously, you kinda need to sell your game in Steam if you're going to get meaningful cut-through in the PC gaming space. As much as the Epic Games Store is there, I think we all know it is a black hole of visibility. Now, devs have seemingly raised this with Valve so often that in their internal messages, one Valve staff member joked that he would get their policy, quote, tattooed on my back like it's the Declaration of Independence. Not a great look. But of course, bigger developers do get more of a personal touch. And on that note, emails suggest that Valve actively forced AAA developers to raise prices on games sold off Steam, or else lose access to Steam's market. This starts off with Ubisoft. They put out a $15 starter pack for Rainbow Six Siege on the Uplay store. So it's on the Uplay store. We are not talking about Steam keys here. This pack was not listed on Steam, and Valve's response was an email warning that they would delist every version of the game, quote, by end of day tomorrow, unless Ubisoft ensured parity. Then there's Warner Bros. There are emails showing that in 2017, Valve business development employee Cassidy Gerber warned Warner Bros. Executives that pre-orders for Middle-earth Shadow of War had been delisted. The reason why? because Steam's pre-order price was higher than everywhere else. Because of this decision, Warner Bros. Interactive president David Haddad was calling her, quote, within hours to get them back in Steam. And that shows us just how important this was to WB Interactive. Now, these emails would show market manipulation. No one is allowed to undercut Valve's price and exist on their platform. Now, in an equal world, that would be fair. Developers are not entitled access to Steam, and Valve's position is that you don't give Steam customers a worse deal than they can get in the rest of the market. But the thing is, Valve's market position is not equal. They are the dominant PC store with a huge share of PC gaming sales, and for most customers, it of course doesn't feel like any form of hostile monopoly. Certainly, when we think of hostile monopolies, we can think of things that feel way worse for us as customers. Steam has built a great store and a great platform, and they've made themselves the best place to sell games. I think that is the case. I think Steam is the best place to sell games, almost bar none. I have many criticisms of it, but it is still the best. But here's the thing that's really important, right? This is not some referendum on do you like Steam or not, right? It's not a trial about how good Steam is or how bad other stores are. It's about whether Valve are now taking their dominant position and using their dominant position to stop anyone else from offering lower prices. Of course, Valve very much don't think they are. So for Valve's part, they deny everything. Gabe Newell said it over and over again in his deposition. Quote, Valve does not have a policy or practice of dictating prices to third-party software developers on other platforms. And the funny thing is, Gabe did not change his tune even when lawyers put evidence of his own staff discussing this stuff in front of him. Gabe even deflected the question of how Steam would react to lower prices on competing stores. Gabe said, quote, I'm confused by your question. Many of our partners and many of our customers are quite happy with the service that we're providing. Of course, Gabe, you're a smart man. We all know you're a smart man, and we all know that that's not the point of the question. You didn't answer it directly. In a separate statement, Gabe explained that, quote, customers have enormous choice whether they buy the game on Xbox, whether they buy it in Steam, whether they buy it on Epic Games Store, or whether they buy it directly from software developers. But the question here is whether that choice is between two prices that Valve have set for you, right? Because yes, we do have options to buy in other storefronts, but the whole point of this is that if we go to another storefront and the price in that storefront is effectively set by Valve leveraging their dominant market position and price parity requirements, then yeah, we technically have choice, but it's a bit of a false choice because we should be able to have choice in pricing as well. Now, going back to Cassidy Gerber, that Valve employee, well, lawyers put her own emails about the policy in front of her, and she obfuscated as well. Gerber denied that it was a policy, claiming the entire concept was alien to a place like Valve. Quote, I don't really know what you mean by policy. In general, I don't feel like we have a lot of policies. That sounds kind of bureaucratic to me. Now remember, this is the policy that her colleague joked about getting tattooed on his back. So I understand that she is being, let's just say, legally coached, right? I mean, look, her job is as a Valve employee. So yeah, I get it. She's going to be running defense for the company, she's going to be dodging awkward questions and not getting their legal team, well, not getting Valve into hot water by making life harder for Valve's legal team. That does make sense. In the system, that's how it works. It just does feel a little bit off when we have communications like that one saying, I'll get this tattooed on me like it's the Declaration of Independence. Now, after that deflection, a lawyer for the plaintiffs then read verbatim from what Gerber herself told a developer in one of her emails. Quote, Steam's policy has always been to require material parity for things we sell on the Steam store. Gerber replied, simply saying that she didn't remember saying that. Of course, the good news is she doesn't need to remember. It's an email. And to follow up on her specifically, Business Week did request for comment and she did not respond to their request. So, Valve's plan, as is presented here, appears to be this. With so much obfuscation and so little management structure, they can frame every emailed demand for price parity as a mistake or a misunderstanding. How convenient. And the question is, will that be a good enough defense? If Willfire win at the jury trial, it probably won't destroy Valve, but it will sting. The suit is absolutely asking for damages. But here's the thing. Valve were estimated to make $4 billion from Steam sales alone before Christmas 2025. So what it would likely mean, say things went through in this jury trial, is an injunction. And that would mean no more delisting developers and publishers for offering you a lower price on their platform. It would mean that, for example, an indie dev could say to their own community, here is a copy of our game, and you know what, it's actually a good bit cheaper because it's sold on our website, it's DRM free, there's no 30% cut from Valve, and because of that, we're going to give you a better deal and pass on some of the savings. It would mean that, which appears to currently not be possible, or at least, if it's done, to be extremely risky, it would mean that would actually be an okay thing that developers could do. Now, it would not mean the players would have to leave Steam. Steam is convenient. No one's going to force you out of Steam. Many people would probably keep buying on Steam even if they could get a technically cheaper price for a non-Steam key elsewhere. Just like they do literally right now, even when, say, a third-party store will sell keys for cheaper. But all those emails showing Valve pressuring developers and limiting their options, well, if this stuff goes through, then that could not happen again. And let's be real. Who should we be advocating for here? Is it the big, many billion-dollar value corporations, ones that here appear to be engaging in some cartel-like behavior? Or ultimately, should we be advocating for developers and customers? Because at the end of the day, the whole thing exists so the developers can make games and customers can get games. Everything in the middle is essentially facilitating that. Of course, it's doing that in a way that I do believe is value added. That's fine. Valve can charge for the value that they add in the form of their fee. But the point of today isn't that them doing that is bad. It's that them engaging in price controls limits your options elsewhere, meaning that you lose out and meaning that developers lose out. I think that is quite obviously a bad thing. So for all the good that Valve does, this is a serious issue, and that's why we cover it. Because at the end of the day, as much as Gabe Newell is a meme, as much as Gabe is actually someone who I respect a hell of a lot, who I find to be fascinating, who I enjoy listening to whenever, we get the rare example of him speaking, while I find, he's got his yachts and his fleet of things that he's using for sea exploration. I'm like, you know what? That's kind of cool. There's some form of dream that this dude's living, and it seems he's been able to get to that place pretty much by video games being awesome. Look, that stuff's all dope. But at the end of the day, this is about big companies. It's not about whether Gabe's a cool meme lord. Now, there is another company who's big thinking about their strategies. They're also a company that have been sued in today's video. It's Microsoft. They're talking about a big reset, and if you heard all that talk of Xbox Project Helix being some north of $1,000 console that would be for the super fans, it seems that plan may be dead, and that a lot of things are changing, and you can learn about it all in this video next.